Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great lunch, a lot of time to network and taste some delicious food. So you might remember a little bit earlier we talked with Emmanuel Ladan about the crucial role of investment in the blue economy. And as we move toward a sustainable future, it is vitally important to raise awareness among investors like yourselves about the vast opportunities that lie right within the ocean. So we're going to take a closer look at the many blue economy opportunities that are out there and just how investors can make the most meaningful impact with our next panel. So for this Investor Outlook panel, would you please welcome Stephanie Rakels, who is Chief Development Officer of Aquaspark. Also with us, the CEO of HALJ Family Office, Mohamed Nadar, and your moderator and Head of Sustainable and Impact Investing at Barclays, Damien Ayatakis. All right.
Thank you, Jeannie, and welcome back from lunch for everybody. Hopefully everybody's had some coffee as well, but I think the panel will keep you awake, hopefully so, as we talk about sort of the investment side here. Let's start with a bit of context. We know raising capital is hard. We also know finding high-quality investments is hard as well. And this gets more challenging when we start talking about ocean opportunities. And so today, with the help of Stephanie and with Mohamed, we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at a successful investment relationship journey from both sides. And so let me introduce, it's a pleasure to have with me Stephanie, the Chief Development Officer of Aquaspark, which was founded in 2013. Aquaspark is a Dutch holding company that is investing in some of the most innovative solutions to aquaculture's biggest challenges. Currently, they manage over 520 million euros of assets that is across a portfolio of 28 companies. Stephanie has been with the firm since its founding as an investment manager, building an expert network of aquaculture specialists, and now supporting investor relations and development. Mohamed, the CEO of HALJ. This is a family office, one of the branch of the Jamil family, a leading global family based out of Jeddah. Mohamed has been part of that organization for 20 years, and as the chief executive, he has responsibility for overall investment activities with a particular background in real estate, but he was also the lead for the investment into Aquaspark, and we'll hear a little bit more about that transition for them. With that brief intro, let's get into the discussion. I'll divide it into three parts: the initial connection, the courting, and then the continued relationship. And with apologies for given our short time frames, we don't have time for questions. But as I said, I'm very confident with the highlight of the story of this initial, or the initial, I'll say the initial 10 million euro investment into Aquaspark in 2019, and reflecting on wider experiences, it will be very enlightening for all of you. So first question to both of you. Obviously, we've got the conversation on aquaculture just after this, so we'll leave that broader conversation, but I want to get us started just from each of your perspectives. In one sentence, how would you describe or how would you pitch why invest in aquaculture? And Mohamed, I'll let you start first in that topic.
Okay, well, I'll start by talking kind of the evolution and the journey of how we started thinking about it, but that had much more to do with the principal in our office and his passion for fishing, and he often went out at least twice a week to fish. So if he's happy, he goes fishing more, and if he's unhappy, he goes fishing so he can relax. And so he always felt this is kind of something he has a passion about and wants to invest in, but also looking at the growth in the global population and how much global warming cattle cause. He felt that there has to be an alternative source of protein, and the one that he felt was somewhat untapped was aquaculture. That aquaculture was untapped. Plus, there's a depletion of fish in the ocean. So he thought the more will be the new path and the new opportunity to have an alternative source of protein. And that's how we started going into this. It started about a 10-year passage. But I think should I?
No, it was great. It was great. We'll get back to a little bit more of the story in a second. But what I heard you take away was, if your principal is a fisherman, that's very helpful to get into aquaculture. Or alternatively, if you've identified protein as a major source of future, those two options are available to you.
One sentence, right?
Yes.
Well, aquaculture is one of the fastest growing food production sectors out there, according to the FAO, from now until 2050, seafood consumption, the increase of seafood consumption, 96% needs to come from aquaculture. So that's an enormous challenge, and we should better make sure it is done right. So a lot of opportunity there, great entrepreneurs out there.
Fantastic. All right. So we've set a little bit of the context and the background to the thinking about why aquaculture. Let's start looking at the organizations and the connection between the two organizations and the motivations a little bit more in detail about that leading into it. Now, Mohammed, can you provide a bit of context to the family portfolio, but also the move, the rationale of the move from primarily real estate into more venture, earlier stage companies, and then also into the aquaculture space? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, we're still primarily invested in real estate, and we do that directly in-house. But the move into aquaculture, again, it starts with personal interest and trying to find different manners of trying to invest. The reality is we only have, and from a venture capital or private equity perspective, we only have two themes, which one is a tech portfolio and another is aquaculture. So but so far, you know, we intend to go further, but that's all we have so far.
No, well, it's great to see, obviously, the selection. And obviously, as I understand the story, can you share a little bit about how you first heard from, well, to Stephanie, how you first heard from Mohammed in terms of how he contacted you in those initial conversations?
Yes, absolutely. So Mohammed actually gave a phone call to our office. And typically in our office, when we receive a phone call, it's a lot of cold calling from portfolio companies that need cash. So I don't know who you reached from our office, but it was obviously someone that thought Mohammed was looking for an investment or for advice. So he was a little whooshed off. But I'm very glad he was persistent, and ultimately we ended up in a conversation, initial conversation.
Yeah. I mean, if I can just
please.
For us, you know, we've been interested in the theme for more than 10 years, but it was very difficult to find a fund that is involved. And through most of this was just internet research. So through going through this, the majority of people we found were like independent consultants, small advisors, but nobody who was really working on the entire value chain, as you mentioned earlier, or the entire ecosystem. So in talking to Aquaspark, what we noticed is that it's not just about investing in fish farms, but trying to solve the problems that are not just that are being somewhat created by just fish farms, but so as you focus on the entire value chain, you can help improve the impact, and that's what we felt about what they're doing, and that somewhat our objectives were aligned. The other thing, I don't know if we should go into further discussions, but we are very long-term investors. We don't really do 5-year exits. So as we talk to Aquaspark is a long-term investor and trying to create an ecosystem that is sustainable in a long-term context.
No, I think it's great. I think it may be a bit of a surprise that any of you as fund managers might get a cold call from an investor one day who happened to find you across the internet. But it was a number of years ago, and well done in terms of finding and doing the research around it. I guess I am curious, because you'd mentioned as well that you'd done a little bit of work in listed companies initially, in terms of what made the shift into the private markets interesting for you and Aquaspark particularly. Before we get into the diligence side, just sort of what did you see on the website and in the first conversations that was interesting?
Well, as we started thinking, I mean, this is more of a 10-year journey. As we started thinking about getting invested into aquaculture, all we initially could find are like publicly traded salmon farms in either New Zealand or Norway. That was pretty much the market was limited to this. So we started off by having an equity portfolio. Simultaneously, we're always looking for a fund manager who had expertise in the area, but as I mentioned earlier, all we could find is independent researchers, people who had like maybe a very small sum under management. Nobody felt credible to us until we bumped into Aquaspark. So until that point, it was really hard finding somebody who at least we hadn't found them if they existed. We didn't find them until we bumped into Aquaspark.
Fantastic. And obviously, the HILOJ is not your only investor. You have about 300 across a number of different countries. I'm curious in terms of the motivation, right? We're still in that first section talking about sort of the motivation. And I imagine some of them are seeing that business opportunity and some of them are personally motivated. If you were to, let's say, draw a Venn diagram and look at sort of the percentages of those that are purely financially or purely personally, and then in the middle, how would you split sort of those 300 or so investors that you have?
Yeah, it's not the easiest question. It's indeed, today we have a network of over 350 investors from 32 countries, really broad range from foundations, family offices, high net worth individuals, fund of funds, institutional investors, industry, corporate. So the motivation is for each very different. But I think we're at the intersection of a few sectors, from blue economy to food systems, agtech, to even climate change. So we tick a lot of boxes for a lot of investors. And for us, the story, you know, we invest across the value chain. We want to make strong returns, like everyone does. But the impact story is no trade-off, so it goes hand in hand. So when you talk about the Venn diagram, I think there's a lot of overlap. There's only a few investors that would be there purely for the impact, I would say. And there would only be a few investors that are purely there for the returns. But we say, like, you know, this can go hand in hand. And that is actually how we can make a change and really make an impact. Because we want to, I mean, our ambition is to really show the industry we can do this, we can work in a sustainable way, make those returns. And that's the only way to do it.
I am curious, actually, because we do talk a lot about sort of the double benefits, and there are definitely those that are motivated by the cause or the issue. I'm actually curious, just as you said that there were not many. What do you think is driving the identification of the holding company as an opportunity for those purely financially motivated?
Yeah, I think quite a few investors see that this is a really fast-growing industry, and if you invest early stage and there's a lot of growth happening, that they can make those returns. I mean, yeah.
And so are you educating them on that opportunity, or have they identified it already and then they're coming to you as a thematic play and therefore saying that?
I think it's the first one, mostly.
Okay.
Yeah. But we also we need to educate people, and we think that's part of our role as well. I mean, when you look at blue economy, I don't know if there's a lot of investors like Mohammed that really see the opportunity and really the investment case behind it. But there's, you know, in aquaculture, there's so much innovation happening. There's such great entrepreneurs, quite a few here. Yeah, you can really scale and grow.
Yeah.
And, great opportunities.
I do think it's one of the things that, you know, as we go back and talk about how do we bring more capital in, is getting the stories out to people that still, while this community is aware and understands the challenge, I think we still lack some of the broader mainstream understanding of it. Oh, sorry, were you going to say?
No, I was going to say totally agree, and we see this as part of our role to do advocacy, like really tell the story, and you know, we need to spread the word, and that's also where investors help as well. I mean, this whole community of investors that we have, they tell the story as well. So,
no, I can definitely add that one of the main reasons we were continuing and have continued to invest and top up a little bit with Aquaspark is because we wanted this to be a learning opportunity, and Aquaspark has been open about allowing us access and helping us learn more and more about this segment.
No, that's great, and we'll talk a little bit more about the relationship and how it's evolved. But let's go. So you've met, the meet cute has happened in the official terms. Moving on from that initial connection, let's talk about the detail of due diligence, sort of that investment decision making. Mohammed, let me start with you. How did you diligence Aquaspark, coming from a real estate background? Can you explain a little bit more, outline the investment process and the investment timeline as to how you approached it, both with Aquaspark, but also with investment committee, with family members, et cetera?
Well, I mean, when we met Aquaspark, first I met Aquaspark for myself, and I felt everything felt good and felt legitimate. And then the principal and myself, we had another meeting with the founders. But you know, we can do due diligence on real estate, but we didn't have an in-house capability to really carry out a due diligence on Aquaspark. So we asked another head of another family office in London that we're kind of a part of a similar group that we meet regularly. And he went out and met Aquaspark And they did a detailed report and came back to us, and they felt it's rather positive, so that we continued from there. It probably took us about 6 months from the time I contacted them to the time we made our first investment.
Yeah, it was interesting. You said sort of there is no time frame with family offices. Sometimes it's very fast and sometimes it's very slow. Yes. I'm curious how, if you're on the other side, how do you keep engaged with, if you were on the potential investee side, what are the things that can help move that decision making along, if anything, do you think, Mohammed?
Well, the important thing is, what I feel is transparency when you're communicating with the family, the investor, or the family offices, because it's a lot of it has to do with confidence in the information they're giving us, and the more confidence we gained in what they told us, and when they tell us something, we know that, a few months later it happens. They're not just promising us all these pie in the sky things. The more we gain confidence, the decision doesn't get that much faster, but at least it becomes easier for the principal. And within a family office, a lot of things that are discretionary of the discretion of the principal. So sometimes he responds right away, and sometimes it takes a couple of months to think about it. So.
Very good, very good. Well, off fishing, as it were. But what did it feel like from the other side?
Yeah, it's very interesting speaking to investors and see the different time frames. I've had phone calls with investors, and 3 hours later I got a phone call. I'm investing 3 million in your fund, which is quite interesting. But the family office that Mohammed hired did a very intense due diligence. But for us, the step before, indeed, getting to know the investor, and for us also, we want to be aligned with the investors that onboard us, because that's important also with the model that we have. So we felt good about it, and then there was quite an intense due diligence process from the external office, and of course that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time, gives you gray hair sometimes. But when an investor does a very thorough due diligence process and then is positive and invests in you, it's also like, okay, we're doing something well. So that's really, we like that a lot.
Were there any hurdles that, either that you came back to that other family office, or that you noted that really were uncertain moments in the process for you, as you were sort of digging in more detail, that you said, well, this is a no-go point unless we get more clarity around this?
Well, what came back was positive. I mean, I think had he come back and was a bit vague in a couple of areas, or felt, a lot of it has to do with what he felt about the meeting the founders, and whether he felt they were sincere in what they were doing or not. And we had sufficiently positive feedback. But in addition to that, it's getting a sense of the performance track record, and at that stage, they were just getting to the right scale, but they have been doing relatively well and kind of scaling up and improving the valuations of what they're dealing with.
Yeah, so just good timing and good communications and transparency. I guess you don't obviously win every ticket in terms of the investor conversations. For those that you haven't won, as you guys have either done post-mortem or just thinking about it, what are some of the reasons that you've gone back and sort of developed or refined what you've said, or how you've engaged with investors, that are learnings for your organization that others might take away?
Like what went wrong in conversations with investors? I think, communication, open communication. I think what Mohammed is already flagging is just really important. Keep the conversation going. I would say the moment you start a conversation with the investor, keep momentum. Just not giving it any follow-up. That's not helpful. So people want to feel engaged and don't just lay back and wait for the investor to come to you. I think building relationships is just really important. So be proactive. That's crucial. Yeah, and you really need to also sense, like, it's different types of relationships, right? It's what an institutional investor needs from you is quite different from a family office or an individual, or just build a relationship and see how you create a partnership. We always talk about a marriage, even, like it's a long-term relationship. So
And
What is that going to look like?
so that's a great transition to the last topic for us, which is after the initial ticket written, the ongoing relationship. So 2019 is after the 6 months of diligence and sort of the initial contact. Since that's been a few years, let's talk a little bit about how that's evolved and the relationship has evolved. Stephanie, let me stay with you. In terms of how do you see that evolving and growing over the last few years with both the family office and the principal?
Well, we are here today. That's
Yeah.
I think
Still together.
That says no, but it's really nice. I mean, also based on the needs of Mohammed and his team, we provide update calls, or we check in with each other. There's several ways to engage. I mean, what has been really helpful for us is, of course, their long-term vision. And the fact that they got to know us, have done follow-on investments over time. But to see that there's like this genuine relationship and that we are aligned is just really, really great.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, the biggest thing is just getting confidence in the answers, but also when you ask a question, if we want to learn about one of the underlying companies in the portfolio, we feel like we're getting an honest answer. Also, they're very proactive about when there's a company in trouble in their portfolio, they don't hide it. It's not. So all these things kind of improve their confidence level as we progress.
Yeah, and that maybe to add to that trend, we feel transparency to investors is really important. You want to be transparent, and I think it creates trust. So you don't want to sell that steep hockey stick, that everything is going well, because it never is. And not all goes well. I mean, there's always challenges. We invest early stage and also later stage, and I think that creates trust with investors.
Yeah, it's something I think both from an industry perspective, both the impact side, but also the venture side, is that idea that everything should be positive at all points in time. But I remember you saying that that wasn't something that you necessarily believed from other managers coming to you and pitching that this was going to be a hockey stick and everything was going to be fantastic at all points. What do you have a sense in terms? Oh, sorry, go on. What do you have a sense in terms of, as you're engaging or talking in that ongoing basis, to be looking for? What can investee companies or funds do for you to help with that engagement, or that brings it to life, and sort of, because you have continued to add capital to the holding company?
I mean, a lot of it is just feeling that we're continuing to learn, and we're learning more about the entire ecosystem or value chain of the aquaculture world. And we feel, I mean, in addition to just seeing what AquaSpark's trying to do, which is create synergy between all the underlying companies, which ultimately adds to the value of each of the companies as well. It's not just that they're cooperating and building some, but actually they're improving the valuation of each of the other companies by improving sales and activity.
Actually, it's a great point. A bit of a divergent topic, but it is unique, not unique, but you have really focused. I've always liked how that bit more systemic for you from what we heard this morning. Can you share just a little bit about that idea in terms of how you've worked in terms of identifying portfolio companies and bringing them together?
Yeah, it's the core of our strategy. We invest globally and across the value chain. So from operations, farming, to feed ingredient companies that can replace the unsustainable feed ingredients, to tech, to marketing, distribution, etc., animal health, animal welfare. And we really want to build a portfolio. We call it a portfolio ecosystem, or a portfolio with synergies in it. So, of course, all the portfolio companies all need to tick like a certain amount of boxes. We want to see a great team, scalable, ready for growth, some revenues, etc. But we also want to see a fit with the other portfolio companies. We want them to benefit from each other and grow together. So as part of the shareholders agreement, we ask them to sign what we call a shared values manifesto, in which they commit to becoming part of this ecosystem, cooperating with the other portfolio companies, no use of antibiotics or chemicals, unless there's really an other way around. So really also involving with our expert network. So it's really, together we can make a change. And that's the portfolio companies, but also the investor community. We want to be more, we want to be way more as an investor than just the organization that provides the cash. We want to add value connect them to investors, and many investors also like to do, for example, well, besides learning, do direct investments in specific portfolio companies. And through us, they have that opportunity, and that way we can help the portfolio companies to get access to additional finance, for example. So we really believe in, like, everyone together, we can make a change. That's
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit more about what you've learned in that process of being a good fund to investors. What are some of the lessons that you've taken away over the years in your different roles as well?
Yeah, maybe as an investor, maybe towards our portfolio companies, of course, like I already said, it never all goes well. And one of the big lessons learned is we have made investments in companies with a really great founder, really great technology, for example, with a vision. But if the founder is not able to attract the right talent, cannot see its own limitations, if you don't build the right team, however small your company is, then it's not going to work. So one of the big lessons learned is, we invest in teams. We need at least to have like a founder that has a great vision how to build a team and to be able to identify what skills they need to really grow their company. That's a crucial one. Yeah. We now have, of course, almost 10 years of experience, but that's one of our major lessons learned.
Yeah. Mohammed, let me ask, I know there's no plans, and I'm not suggesting one way or the other about divesting from Aquaspark, but if there was ever a moment or something were to happen, because that is something, right? You're constantly evaluating holdings. Yeah. What would be a reason why you might think about either reducing or exiting a position?
Well, if we start to ask them questions and we don't get answers, and we feel like, because depending on, I've dealt with other fund managers who are like, they're not straightforward, and you can tell the difference between an answer that just takes time to obtain versus an answer that is being held back. So if we feel at any time that we no longer have that level of transparency and the level of willingness to share information with us, that would be the times we start changing our mind.
Okay.
Yeah, and that goes back again to transparency, but also really building genuine relationships. I think we actually had a conversation around that last night. Yeah. But it's that's so important. Build genuine relationships and be transparent. And I think then investors are there also to support you, also when things get hard. And that's what we all want, right?
Indeed, indeed. Well, that leads us actually nicely on to that sort of one final question to both of you. I guess if you were to talk to the other side, if you will, the investor side, and you were to give them one piece of advice, what would be the thing that you would want them to know or understand about making an investment that would help them to be more successful and help more broadly? I'll ask both of you, but Stephanie, please, you first.
Yeah, I find that an interesting question. I have a lot to say about that, but I'm going to focus on look beyond the structure. Look beyond the structure and look at the opportunity that you see. There's so much innovation happening, and get to know aquaculture and all the innovation happening there. It's interesting. Yeah.
Great. And Mohammed, for you, what piece of advice would you give to the other side in terms of the fund managers?
I think you should focus much more on research and investment than sales. So if we're getting too much of a hard sell, and there are more salespeople on the team than there are actual analysts, then I think it would be the wrong fund for us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for the insights and sharing a little bit of the relationship as it's developed over years. Hopefully some interesting takeaways for all of those on either side. And obviously both will be around a little bit later for further questions and views from both of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Damien, thank you so much for moderating that fireside chat. A big thank you again to Stephanie and Mohammed for that look at financing ocean innovation. Now, one area we've just been talking about where there is obviously a lot of blue economy opportunities is in aquaculture, but the scale at which it's growing is also creating a lot of challenges when it comes to sustainability. And we're going to take a closer look at that now with some great new solutions in our next panel. This is called Empowering Progress Through Technology in the Aquaculture Space. So for this, can I please have on stage our moderator, Nancy Heslin, Editor-in-Chief of the Monegasque, as well as her panelists. Please welcome Ali Rose, Ocean Lead, Creo Syndicate, Christo Duplessis, the CEO of Matorka, Robin Millington, the CEO of Planet Tracker, Alessandro Romano, CEO of Itinsect, and Sven Joran Kolsto, the CEO of Optoscale. Welcome to all of you.
Good afternoon. If we can get another mic, please, that would be great. Robin and I can share, but there is one. This is why we're a team. I feel like we're team aquaculture, and we've been rehearsing all year for the big Monaco Ocean Week. But thank you for joining us. As Stephanie just said, get to know the aquaculture and the technology that's around it, and here is your opportunity. With over 50% of the world's seafood now being sourced from aquaculture, this rapidly growing sector plays a pivotal role in global food security, for supporting livelihoods, and also for alleviating pressure on wild fish stocks. However, as you will find out, whenever there is this type of growth, there are always challenges. And in this case, we are looking at challenges with biodiversity and a threat to marine ecosystems. So to address all of these issues, let's meet our team today. These panelists are people that are paving the way for a more sustainable future in aquaculture and for our oceans. So I will start. Robin is right beside me. Robin Millington is the CEO of Planet Tracker. Would you like to introduce yourself, Robin?
Hi. Planet Tracker is a philanthropically funded think tank that's aimed at the financial industry. We're trying to take into our evaluations the, if you will, internalizing the externalities, making sure that we're giving true value to ecological issues, water, etc. And we're trying to get everybody going. We're not waiting for perfection in the absolute metrics to be available. We're trying to show how to get forward now on that.
Wow, that was nice and brief. Alessandro Romano, CEO of Itinsect. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience this afternoon?
Yes, hi, I'm Alessandro. I'm the founder of Itinsect. Our mission is to reduce human impact on the marine environment. And actually, I have a question for the audience, which is how many of you knew that a quarter of global fishing doesn't go into human consumption, but goes directly into animal feeds? And So it's not a lot of people, and we are a very educated audience on the blue economy. And in fact, we developed a protein meal that replaces the need of catching fish from the ocean for the aquaculture and the farming feeds. So we have biotech processes that use enzymatic processes and microbial processes where we recreate the nutritional profile of fish meal so that we can break the chain between fishing and aquaculture.
Thank you. Christo Duplessis, CEO of Matorka.
Thank you so much. It's very simple. Matorka is an integrated land-based aquaculture company. We produce the world's finest Arctic char in the world's most magical place, and that happens to be Iceland. And I hope to get the opportunity to enlighten you as to why Iceland is the best place in the world to farm this fish.
Thank you, Sven. Sven Joran Kolsto, CEO of Optoscale.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the founder of Optoscale, and we have developed AI to help fish farmers basically make better decisions. That's related to, for instance, feeding. When they start using Alessandro's feed, they can make sure they're feeding the correct amount, not too much, not too little. You can make sure you have a good fish welfare by always knowing how the fish is doing, and also automating many of the tasks. So I can probably get back to the automation part of it.
Thank you. Ali Rose, Ocean Lead, CRO Syndicate.
Hi, I am Ali, and I'm the Oceans Lead of Creo. It's an organization that is a nonprofit that convenes ultra-high net worth family offices that are looking to deploy capital into climate solutions. So I, as the Oceans lead, I help curate deal flow for our members, put out research on market trends in the industry, and I also arrange programs to help with knowledge information that the family offices would benefit from. And aquaculture is a sector that our family offices have been interested in for quite a few years now, and it's been great to see it grow with more companies coming into the mix.
Thank you, Ali. So let's look at sustainability challenges and opportunities. Traditional aquaculture is posing several problems related to water pollution. We have wastewater containing chemicals and antibiotics. Genetic pollution, when we have species that are escaping their pens into the wilderness. And we also have energy consumption and food. Yet, aquaculture still represents more than half of the seafood production, and this will only continue to increase in the future. So let's set the stage. I'm going to ask Robin to give us an overview of this panel this morning for Team Aquaculture. Robin, Planet Tracker's Aqua Failure Report identifies a 50 million ton BAU production gap by 2050. So can you set the scene for us by looking at on-land food and the current state of climate and food production modeling, which you say is not accounting for the current rapid growth?
So when we looked at the aquaculture, based on what we know today, we know that by 2050, based on business as usual, there'll be 217 million tons. In our projection, based on all the UN modeling and the FAO, plus the population modeling, we're going to need 270 million tons. So there's a 50 to 60 million gap. Now, where is that coming from? Our panelists are all looking at some of the technology that will get us there, but in our modeling, what we have found is that represents 2% of the gap, right? So based on today's statistics, what we do see is that regenerative aquaculture, which is bivalves, seaweed, things that do not require fish feed, will be a bigger piece of that gap. So we need to be thinking differently about what we're doing in aquaculture. So I want to pose a challenge. I'm going to be a bit of an agent provocateur. So we are looking today, we need to improve what we're doing today. We need to get the fin fish and the various fish that we're raising today more sustainable. Great. Let's get those technologies going. Let's not wait until 2050 to do that. But we need to look at differently. We need to look at 2050 and say, what do we need in 2050? Not what we want or what we think will grow out of today's system, but rather, what is it that we need, and let's work backwards. When you look at 2050, and now I'm going to pull us out of oceans and look at land food production, because the food system is an overall system. It's not just seafood, it's not just land. If you look at projections that were done before the 2022-2023 hottest years on record, and now 2024 is being projected to be the same, before the 3-year La Nina that was supposed to be cooling the Pacific and left us with the hottest sea surface temperatures on record. And now we're going into the El Nino in the middle of it right now that is only continuing to raise temperatures. And they think we may flip to another La Nina, and nobody knows. We're in uncharted territory right now. So the models that have been done by the IPCC, the climate change, the UN climate change science body, have not taken into account the rapidity, the intensity, and the ferociousness of what's happened in the climate feedback loops in the last year. And I think you'll hear Jim Skia, who's the head of IPCC, is saying that they're relooking now at their models to try and integrate more into that. I have also talked to a director at the FAO, and they are saying the same thing. They have based their models on what's happened in the past. What we are in now is feedback loops that are happening without anything in the past to predicate that. And one of the things neither of those models has taken into account is the instability of the jet stream. Now, the jet stream instability is what brought that heat down a couple of years ago and burnt that village in Canada. And last year, it brought heat down to Texas and Arizona in America, causing the highest temperature records ever clocked in the southern United States and collapsing their summer wheat crop in Texas. And that summer wheat crop is important to feeding the world. So if we're getting instability in the jet stream, that means the models we're looking at that project out to 2050 actually aren't correct. So we have to be thinking in 2050, how do we future-proof aquaculture, if I can bring it back? But let me give you one more statistic about land. If you look at a study that was done, again, before 2022, 2023, it looked at, as just on the projections that we have right now, as the equator heats, you've got 4 major commodities that will be pushed out of that heat zone at the equator. And if you go 60 degrees north, there's a map over there, you can see. It's Canada and Alaska, it's a tip of Greenland, it's across Siberia. You're going to be pushing a lot of those commodities into growth areas at that level, 60 degrees north. 30 degrees south, you've got Chile and Argentina, pretty much. You've got some of Australia, a little bit of New Zealand, Tasmania, and you've got the penguins hanging their toes off of South Africa. Where is the land to grow the crops? So as food-based crop production reduces, future-proofing something like aquaculture is going to become more and more and more important. But future-proofing aquaculture doesn't mean just more coastal pin farms, because the heat in those areas will mean that you can't have those coastal farms. So that means we're going to have to be looking at some systems that are going to be less vulnerable to climate, which means RAS, the on-land closed systems. It means cultivated lab-grown meat. It means things that won't be dependent on the climate heating like it is. So with that said, we need investment to get us to even the 2% of the 50 million ton gap. We need 30 billion invested just in the technologies of offshore cultivation and RAS. Overall, if we're going to invest into the regenerative bivalve, seaweed, that sort of thing, our projection is that we need in the neighborhood between 55 billion at a minimum to 140 billion. Now, Ali will talk to this later, but her investment group is what, around 100 million right now? So we're in hundreds of millions at this point, and we need hundreds of billions.
Wow, thank you very much for setting the stage on that. Ali, let's continue with that and look at some of the risks socially and with human risk here. What are some of the costs that we faced if we don't invest in these solutions?
Yeah, so something that's really important to consider is what the status of wild fisheries are right now, and thinking about the supply chain in wild fisheries. If people have been reading the Outlaw Ocean Project's expose of the supply chain in China, and have read about the forced labor that is happening on the far-flung fishing vessels, they will have learned that there is a lot of human slavery happening with the Uyghurs and North Koreans in the far-flung fishing vessels and Chinese processing plants. So we should really think about the human and social cost of continuing with some of these wild fisheries, and thinking about aquaculture as a way to alleviate the pressure on those wild fisheries, as well as to attach transparency and traceability to that really lacks within our global wild fishery sector right now. So it's something to keep in mind as we think about aquaculture and the opportunity. Obviously, wild fisheries and aquaculture need to work together to be able to feed our growing to 10 billion people in 2050. But there needs to be transparency, and we need to start really understanding where our food comes from. And aquaculture is a way to do that if it is also done sustainably.
Thank you. So we are seeing a growing number of solutions that address the different issues that we're talking about, especially related to traditional aquaculture, that could help farm managers improve their sustainable practices. Sven, fish welfare is often overlooked, but is a hugely important part of producing food sustainably. How can farmers better face this challenge?
Yeah, so there's a lot of problems. I think we all agree on that, and some of them are more visible than others. I don't know how many of you are familiar with, for instance, farmed salmon, but a typical salmon farm will have 200,000 individuals in a single pen. So it's quite different from the farm I grew up in, right? With cattle, we could see all the cattle. You can see if they have a good life, and if they have a problem, you call the veterinarian. This is not the case with salmon. So there's a lot of instances where there's a lot of disease. It turns into mortality in the end. There's an average of about 16% mortality in the industry, which is terrible both for the fish before and after, you know, the mortality, but it's also really bad for the output. If you think about sustainability, that's feed that's been given to fish that does not end up as food. So the way we can impact that is we are changing. We claim to be a paradigm shift, right? Every entrepreneur probably does claim to be that. But in the old days, you'd maybe pick up 100 fish every month, manually sample, look at the fish, try to get information on how the fish is doing. With our camera system, you can measure 100,000 fish every single day and get information on the disease, on the parasite level, all the things basically that makes a fish farmer go to bed with a lump in his stomach, being unsure. Have I done a good job today? Is my fish healthy? Is it doing well? Should I change something in the diet, in the production? We try to remove all that uncertainty so that the fish farmer can make better decisions also for welfare, but for a range of other applications, which I'll happily speak about if I have more time.
Would you like to address one of these points?
Sure, if I have the time, yeah. So
you have a minute and a half.
Minute and a half, that's good. I think the reason why I started the company was I was living at a farm after my studies for a week to learn. We did manual weight sampling of the fish. I had just finished 5 years of engineering school, and we took out 20 fish, put them on kitchen top weights, and I watched as the weight went from 0 grams to 500 grams in a rocking boat. And that was the way, and still is the way, many fish farmers get the weight sampling done. And why is that important? Well, if you're going to do optimized feeding, for instance, you have to know how much the fish is growing. If you don't know the precise growth of the fish, it is impossible to claim to be feeding the fish optimally as well. So in terms of improving the FCR, the feed conversion rate, our data can be a very important trigger for fish farmers to change operations. Yeah, was that 1 minute?
You have about 3 seconds left. Do you want to breathe?
Yeah, I'll pass it to the next guy.
That's really fascinating. Christo, what technology is being used and what is on its way that's going to minimize environmental impact while improving productivity, which is what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. I've had about 20 years of experience on land-based farming of different species. And strangely enough, simpler is better. So what we found, and one of the things, I'm glad we have an image up of the farm in Iceland, is it's a very simple system. We're farming with a native species that's used to the conditions, used to the water quality, and they live in lakes. So we really mimic the natural environment. So we make use of a lot of ancient technology, if I can call it that. And what we have in Iceland is we have a lot of water, either runoff, snowmelt, runoff from glaciers. It's slightly saline, so it's not in competition, the use of the water, with humans. We're not competing with drinking water or golf courses or anything like that. The water is naturally filtered. The whole island is sitting on lava rock that's a couple of 100,000 years old. All that water gets naturally filtered with the lava rock, so there's no mechanical filtration needed. Our water is geothermally heated. So we're on a geothermal island. The water is a constant 10 degrees Celsius the whole year round, whether it's summer 10 degrees outside or whether it's winter -5. So that means we can literally take the water straight out of the ground, run it through the tanks and clean it out and return it. It's not high tech, but it's a unique set of circumstances that makes it possible for us to be extremely sustainable. We situated right next to a geothermal power plant, so all our electricity comes from geothermal. I can literally see the plant from the farm. Another thing we do is we make use of gravity. So we pump the water once, we do use electricity, but then we reuse it after cleaning it. So we clean the water after each cycle, add oxygen, and it goes through to the next tank. In terms of new technology, there's a finite number of good fish farmers in the world. I'm specifically talking about land-based, and they typically have blue fingers, like a horticulturalist needs green fingers. Now, one of the challenges to scale is to find these individuals who have that knack for fish farming. What the new technology allows us to do is to replicate and leverage off the manager's knowledge. So what Sven is doing and other companies is AI and image processing of fish allows you to see all your fish, like a fish farmer would stand next to the tank and have a look and look at the fish under his care. Effectively, you can do that, and with AI, get masses of data, interpret it, and help the manager make decisions. We've actually implemented a system where we have automated feeding, so it's all remotely controlled. We have cameras in the tanks that will count any feed that's wasted, that's not eaten, and that will speak directly again to the feeding system, and through AI it will keep learning. So it'll pick up seasonal variations, and it'll teach itself to feed the fish on demand. So not only are we not wasting feed, but we're also not wasting a feeding opportunity. So that leads to better utilization, less feed waste, better FCR. What's coming in terms of tech is the next phase is facial recognition for fish. So the software will start recognizing...
Sorry, did you say facial recognition for fish?
Absolutely. So the technology will recognize each individual fish based on spots on the body of the fish. And it will tell you that it's seen the same fish over a period of time, and that was the length and the growth and the welfare of that individual fish. It'll do it for hundreds of thousands of fish. But that's where we're going to, and that's the responsible way, because without welfare, you don't have production. So you want happy, healthy, well-eating fish, and that's the sort of technology that's going to help us.
Do you think some of the fish will protest this new technology of facial recognition? Not going there.
We'll have to check with the EU regulation on privacy.
Robin, do you want to just chime in on this part about fundraising? Is key in this part about being able to meet the gap that you've been talking about, this technology that's coming out. How are we going to pay for all of this?
Well, we need the investment community to step in, but of course we've got all these issues, don't we? They need to understand what the risk looks like. They need to understand what the return is going to look like. And we have to be better at and more prolific at modeling these things at this stage. I mean, I think that there are growing investor interest. I'm not sure that there's a huge awareness about how urgent the issue is. My experience, and I'll look at Ali because we both deal with investors, there is not a recognition that this is a longer term play. It may not be profit tomorrow, or it may not be profit this month, but if we don't start this transition, we're not going to be where we need to be in time to meet the needs of the growing population. And this has got me up at night. I do worry about it, because with the investment community, if you're just doing a pure play on finance, you're not doing that. What is the risk? What is the potential risk of inaction? And we need to model that in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point about the financing of these companies such as ours. We've been fortunate. We have, for instance, Sven Blue Ocean. I believe Olivier and Priska are in the room. Very good investors. Hi, guys. I know they're also raising a new fund, so I'm sure they'll be happy to speak to many of the investors here. But the point is, it's also up to us as entrepreneurs to create businesses that are sustainable to invest in. We can't expect to create systems that have an impact, but are not sustainable financially. So I think it is actually, we should also expect more from us and again, our customers, right? That's going to be the decision gate. Our customers, like the food producers, using new technologies that make them more sustainable, are they investing in it? Because if I were an investor, I would not invest in something that I think could have an impact, but never a financial like sustainability, because it wouldn't scale anyway. Like at some point that stops, money stops. So it's up to us.
I think that there's an issue here about regulatory certainty. If we had more regulatory structure that would give a level playing field and give more certainty. We also have subsidies that are just going the wrong direction, and they're going into supporting maybe old wild catch fisheries instead of looking at the new technology that we need to move forward with.
Well, we're going to talk about feed, and in this, Ali's going to specifically refer to some new financing and ways to finance these ventures, but I'm going to let Alessandro speak. So, Alessandro, here we have a question for you. One of the main issues related to aquaculture is clearly feed. And farmed fish are fed with fish oil and fish meal made out of wild herring, mackerel, anchovies, and sardines. So the growing importance of aquaculture is therefore putting an increased pressure on these species, and there is a need to find alternative sources of protein. So Alessandro, who bears the cost of sustainable aquaculture feeds and feed ingredients? And the second part of that question is, who takes the responsibility of reducing the impact of the aquaculture value chain?
Well, this is a very interesting question, and it's a question that I always ask when I go and see my potential clients and stakeholders in general. I ask them, who bears the cost of turning aquaculture into a more sustainable business, especially reducing its pressure on the ocean? And the real answer is no one would want to, right? So feed producers, fish farmers, even the end consumers don't want to pay extra money to be able to make this value chain more sustainable. There are a series of reasons why. Well, it's especially a matter of cost. So new alternative solutions to fish meal are generally very expensive, but also they are not, or they're very slow at scaling. And also they have another issue, which is quality, because quality needs to be consistent in every ingredient for being able to make hundreds of thousands or even millions of tons of feed. And so in order to prove that this whole system holds together and actually creates value, we made an effort to involve all the stakeholders from the feed producers to the supermarkets and the end consumers. So we went and speak, for example, to the largest supermarket chain in Italy. They have 9 billion euros in revenue alone. And they said, oh, I don't know, novel proteins, how can we advertise that to the end consumers, etc. I said, don't worry, let's try it out. So we involved a feed producer to produce the feed made with our protein. We involved a fish farmer that it's actually the direct supplier of this large supermarket chain. And we fed this fish throughout the production cycle. And we went and we brought this fish to the supermarket to do a blind test on taste and we gave them the results of growth and fish health. And it turned out that not only our fish was 15%, it was growing 15% better, but also it had less fat in percentage, so the fish would have more value when you fillet the fish, and it even won the panel test, so it tasted better. So, in all this, I think it's really hard to to prove all this just on paper. People have to try it out, but people have to be willing to try it out. So now this supermarket is distributing a lot of fish that is grown with our feeds, and they're making extra money out of it because they're making more fillet out of each fish compared to what they used to have before with the traditional feeding.
Thank you. Christo, can land-based fish farms compete with other terrestrial or sea-based protein production when it comes to CO2 levels produced?
Yes, certainly they can. We actually find that fish are very efficient. So in our case, we did our numbers for 2023. We published an impact report. And throughout the year, we saw that we produced 2.7 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of fish. And to put that in context, terrestrial animals like beef and lamb would probably be 15 to 20 kilograms. Poultry and pork would be 5 to 8. So it can be a very low number. And just to add to that, also in terms of the feed, we have a fantastic program in Iceland, which is nothing to do with me, but because there's a huge, well-managed wild fishery, there's a movement called 100% fish. And so they make sure that 100% of the fish that's caught is being used and value added. So in our case, more than 95% of the fish meal that we use are coming from trimmings of wild-caught whitefish, which means that would otherwise probably have gone to waste or very low value, and in this way you actually enhance the value of that catch. So there are ways around, but of course new technology, new novel feed ingredients are here to stay, and we cannot wait for them to scale to start including them.
Yeah, can I just add another thought on this? Seaweed, if you are shifting to growing seaweed as part of your aquaculture product, which also, by the way, can be used to solve some of the plastic problem as possible bioplastics. It can be fertilizer substitute, so we can get away from fossil fuel fertilizer. Seaweed is 20 times more effective than land-based plants in terms of absorbing carbon. So that, to me, seems like a no-brainer in many ways.
Ali, I have a question, and when we were talking about this, I'm actually quite interested to hear your reply to this. So how has the last anchovy fishing season in Peru highlighted the need for feed, and how are you suggesting to ultra-high net worth family offices to think about financing such ventures?
I'm sure this question is on everyone's mind. First, I think I would like to do a zoom out and talk about where the money is going from family offices in CREO into what parts of aquaculture value chain. So I think this is very illuminating when you think about what investors are interested in. Between 2020 and 2022, $14 million were deployed into aquaculture technology companies. Between 2020 and 2022, 27 million US dollars were catalyzed into production systems, most of which were recirculating aquaculture systems, and $55 million were deployed into alternative feed companies. So we see feed as a very necessary solution that we need to solve, because it is, without alternative feed, we are really limiting the growth of aquaculture as we see it now. Actually, 90% of the forage fish, which are the herring, the mackerel, the anchovies, those are converted into fish meal and fish oil. 90% of all of those fish fished within their season. So what has really been interesting to see is the recent Peruvian anchovy season and how that has affected the price of fish meal and fish oil. Peru ended up having to cancel its first anchovy season because there were too many juveniles in the fishery. The Peruvian anchovy fishery is a commercial behemoth. It brings in over $1 billion into the country every year and produces at least half of the global fish meal and about a third of the fish oil. That cancellation reverberated throughout the aquaculture economy. It rose the price of fish meal and fish oil, and to further that, they had to reduce the amount of millions of metric tons that could be caught in the second anchovy fishery. So what usually is about 4.45 million tons of anchovies that are landed throughout the fishery season decreased to 1.2 million metric tons, and 336,000 of those metric tons were juveniles, meaning that they could not be used in fish meal, fish oil. They shouldn't have been caught anyway. So we are seeing a huge issue with the volatility of wild forage fisheries, and an incredible need to be able to identify some of these other solutions. And now there's no solution that has emerged as the single one thing that investors, or I recommend that investors rally around, because it's very hard to replicate the nutritional profile that these forage fisheries give to feed. So we need to think about different solutions as complementary to each other. So we have the black soldier fly larvae, we have the algal oil to help with fish oil, we have plant-based solutions, but it really does take a wide vision of what these feed options need to be in order to really increase aquaculture, sustainable aquaculture production. Another one statistic I'll leave you guys with, sorry, I'm throwing out a lot of numbers here, but 80% of production costs in aquaculture are due to feed. So it's something that's really important to think about, and you know, being able to get alternative feed to price parity as well with typical super prime, which is 65% protein feed, is very important. So it's just an area that is going to be a bottleneck for the sustainable aquaculture industry unless we're able to find those solutions.
Yeah, I wanted to add just a few more numbers because we didn't have enough. So the availability of fish meal decreased obviously a lot, but we also have to think about that aquaculture is increasing as an industry, is growing. So it's growing at 7% per year at this pace. And we are not foreseeing any increase in the availability of fish meal between here and 2030, at least. So what will feed the fish, the salmon, and all the farm fish, if not alternative proteins? And this is going to become a market that will be worth over 20 billion by 2030. So it's really important to invest in this market. And I just want to also tell you about the takeaways that I had from the North Atlantic Seafood Forum that I attended 2 weeks ago, which is the largest aquaculture conference in the world. There were the CEOs of basically all the largest feed companies and of the largest salmon producers, and they were very transparent. And in fact, as Ali was saying, transparency is very important here. They were very transparent in saying that they're reducing the amount of fish meal that they use, but the fish meal is that ingredient that makes sure that the salmon grows healthy, it has a good growth performance, so it's a really key ingredient. And it's for the farmers, it's really hard, because farmers don't want to give up on fish meal. And they need something to replace fish meal one-to-one. Oh, there's it insect. Just saying. But what's also very important is that mortality is increasing in salmon. The average size of salmon that is being fished for the market is decreasing because they want to avoid all kind of diseases, etc. And a lot of this is due to feed. So it's really important to be able, and also food conversion ratio is decreasing because the quality of protein that is in feeds is decreasing because of the lack of fish meal and of other ingredients such as soy.
But Alessandro, let's go into the finance here, because designing sustainable business models is key to deploying these innovative solutions at scale. So do you want to just continue? You talked about scalability, you've talked about consistent quality, cost effectiveness, all these things. Does Intersect provide a product to the industry that respects these perimeters? And if yes, how long will that take?
Yes, so novel proteins generally have a long time to market because we need to respect these three criteria. So it's a scalability, competitive cost, and consistent quality. And what we're doing differently from other alternative proteins is that we set up a model of working with external production partners in order to use our technology that we developed in industrial plants that already have the capacity of producing a lot of it. So we are already taking out the problem of consistent quality and of scalability. In terms of cost, we are reducing costs as we hit the economy of scale, and in parallel, we're working on making our super cool ingredient in-house through the, let's say, standard process of having a pilot plant where we can prove the technology, and also we can prove the economics of the technology, so that we then build an industrial plant. But this takes time, and for us it's very, very important. We say always, in EatInsect, we always say market first. So we really want to create this market and to be able to serve this market even before we have our own facilities.
There are a couple of things embedded in this. In some of the alternative feed that we're looking at, there's soy, but in your, in the desire to replace some of the fish with soy, we're deforesting the Amazon. So we can't just be looking at alternative additives without looking at the holistic issue and what the impacts holistically are. I'm not saying that you're not. I know what you're doing and I think it's great. But the other thing is looking at fish that needs to be fed. I don't have the statistics for onshore facilities, but the capex needed to grow to the 2050 numbers we're looking at for offshore facilities is $6 to $20 a kilogram. For the RAS, the onshore internal system, it's $10 to $24 per kilogram. For cultivated lab grown, it's $50 per kilogram, and that's only seen to reduce to $40 per kilogram by 2050. The most cost-effective growth in aquaculture is actually the regenerative, and that's back to the bivalves and seaweed, but that has a maximum of about $1.50 per kilogram in terms of investment.
Yeah, I think it's also really important to recognize that at different stages of companies' growth, especially with regards to alternative feed, venture financing is not necessarily, nor should it be, the right type of capital going into it. These types of companies require a lot of research and development, where non-dilutive finance with government and private grants are very necessary to be able to identify the right solutions here. So when we're thinking about different financial vehicles that should be coming about in, I would say, the next 5 years, and we are starting to see actually some of this deployment into the space. Actually, I think, Alessandro, the Italian government gave you guys a grant recently, about $600,000 to start more research and development within insect, which is a great example of actual governments taking a step towards this. But I think we'll see a lot more blended finance models coming out for investors to see that there's actually a way to push this alternative feed industry forward. And it might be interesting to see if there are more modular approaches as well to the alternative feed sector, to see if there are companies that aren't just trying to grow to scale within 5 years, but thinking about slow modular growth. And I also think that we should look at emerging countries as well to think about where the alternative feed opportunities are. So I would say that those are my key investment suggestions.
Thank you, Ellie. We have about 5 minutes left on the panel, and we're going to have a Q&A, but I want to give Christo and Sven a chance to also chime in on this subject. Sven, 10 years ago, you sold a company that made it possible to feed fish remotely, which at the time was the best way of improving operations. So how has automation changed the aquaculture space?
Yeah, that's right. So 10 years ago, the way forward was to do remote feeding centers, which was what we did. Collecting the best individuals, the blue fingers, or what you call it, Christo, to feed as many fish as possible. But basically what you're trying to do is have a number of people follow a very strict set of rules without deviation from the rules, which is trying really to get like a computer. So the next wave of improvement, like the next frontier, we call it, will be the automation of a couple of key things in fish farming, feeding being one of them. We're able to do automatic feeding in a very short time. That will enable a lower feed conversion rate, but not least, we can also improve the production output. That's one thing. A different thing altogether is, so every salmon producer, almost no matter where you are in the world, needs to manually sample the fish for these sea lice. It's a parasite that is very bad for both the farmed fish, but also for the wild fish. So our system is approved now by many governments to replace the need for manual sampling of the fish. So you simply automate the task. There's lower cost. There's not the work needed to be done. You don't need to sample the fish, which is bad for the fish, and you get better data. So I think automation is going to bring a lot of improvement. I think Robin had 2% improvement from technology, if I understood correctly. We have much higher ambitions. Maybe it ends up being 2%, but we think there's still a lot to be done in terms of optimizing the production.
Thank you. Christo, round off the panel for us here. What are the key considerations when selecting a site, system design, and smart farming technologies for a land-based aquaculture facility?
Thank you indeed. It'll be a short recap. I've mentioned them. How much energy do you use? Minimize that. Where do you get your energy from? And make sure it's a renewable source. Are you using water? Of course you're using water. What water are you using? Who else is competing for it? And is it sustainable? What are your logistics? Choose your location wisely. Make sure you don't have to fly all your fish. Select your species very carefully. If you can use a native species, it's always easier to manage and less risky than having a non-native species on the site. And then, of course, there's other issues such as zoning permissions, government regulations, whether the community actually wants you there. We've seen some real challenges, not ourselves, but some players in the North American market where they really struggle with communities, and those are the key ones.
Wow, that was a perfect way to end our panel this afternoon. Thank you. And we're right on time, may I say, Team Aquaculture. Thank you. We'd like to open up the floor for questions. I just have to give you a microphone.
Hi, Nick Wise from Ocean Mind. A couple of comments and then a question. So when we're thinking about forage fish, roughly speaking, up to twice the amount of forage fish is needed turned into fish meal to produce a unit of salmon. And a lot of those fish are actually being caught in West Africa as well. And that is depleting stocks and causing starvation and poverty. So I think these things need to be taken into account as well. When we're talking about AI, one of the big challenges there is in false positives and what we currently call hallucination. And I think that is a big challenge to scale. So we need to understand how that is overcome in these various systems. But the question I wanted to ask is actually in reference to Ian Abina's story, which I contributed to. And given that around 90% or maybe less now of aquaculture is in Asia, why do you feel that it would not be subject to labor abuses?
Oh, I mean, for sure it is, but we're talking about sustainable aquaculture, which, you know, I think that there is a big issue here where we need a global definition of what is sustainable, because we have, you know, we have the ASC standards, but we really do need to think about what do sustainable practices look like and what corporations are going to be held accountable for. Because in the end, the money to be able to scale this $55 billion to $140 billion, it's not just going to come from family offices. We need corporations, so we need to make sure that their activities are being judged in all of the same way, with a global definition of where your seafood is coming from. And let's, you know, make sure that all of these practices are sustainable. We also need fiduciaries and pension funds to come in, which there is a data gap right now in order for those risk management products to be developed so that pension funds and fiduciaries feel comfortable to come in. So I'm not saying that there are no bad actors in aquaculture. There for sure are, and that is a very real danger. But when we're thinking about sustainable aquaculture, we need that definition. We need to apply that definition to corporations and their activities. And it needs to be done in the right way so that we don't have any risk of forced labor in the sustainable aquaculture industry.
Hi there, great panel. Thank you all. Sally Ozell from the Stimson Center. I just want to build on what the gentleman here said about West Africa. All one has to do is visit the Gambia or Senegal, and you'll see this explosion of fish meal factories and fish oil factories, which is in fact reducing, the food security, the economic security, and whatnot for coastal communities. That said, the EU and the US has a seafood traceability program. The EU system tracks wild-caught fish. The US system tracks wild-caught and aquaculture fish. None of them track the feed of aquaculture. So question I have is, would it make sense as these traceability systems are building out, would it make sense to include where seafood, aquaculture seafood's feed is coming from, adding those sort of data elements to the listed data elements that are now being tracked?
It would definitely be great to have traceability there. Everybody's doing their bit to be able to trace the value chain. I know that the Aquaculture Stewardship Council is doing quite a bit of work to certify fisheries and make sure that the fish that goes into aquaculture feeds is controlled as much as possible. But for what I know, and I might have wrong data, but none of the feed producers use 100% certified fish meal. And they're working towards it, and we make sure that what goes into our feeds is, for example, only from byproducts from fishing when it gets formulated into complete feeds. But that's ongoing work.
I'd just like to add to that, and that is that the ASC is busy. Well, they have actually launched their feed standard, which is now a standard that the feed companies would have to comply with. And this is not my field, but I know that there is an organization called the Marin Trust, and they definitely track fish meal. So the fact that you can say that it's not 100% certified fish meal means that there is a way to certify your fish meal. So if you want to be responsible, there is a way to make sure and put the pressure on, for instance, a feed company to ask the questions.
Okay, let me just follow up briefly. But what I'm saying is, do you think government tracking traceability systems should include a transparent data element, moving it into the government, because we already have these government systems that track seafood for wild caught?
I think they should, but I don't know if they'll work, to be totally honest. I mean, being able to see what happened with the Ocean Outlaw project report and the corporations that are implied there, they had no idea where their fish was coming from. So I think this highlights the difficulty of traceability within any part of the fishery, whether it's aquaculture, wild fishery, feed as well. There are some places you cannot get data from. And so it is going to be a huge lift. I think that does not mean we should not try. That does not mean we should not try at all, but it's just with the understanding that we have traceability programs already in place that have failed. So we need to figure out something that's either different, where you have to comply with reporting, or you need to be able to get data in different ways from fisheries and aquaculture.
An information that I read, which was why I was quite shocked about, is that still today for human consumption, 1 out of 5 fish that we buy is sold with a different name from what actually that fish is, and especially when we buy it already filleted and already and that we can't recognize as species, and that's already shocking for human consumption. Imagine for fish that goes into becoming a protein meal.
To what extent does this become the responsibility of the fish grower? And I think that it's fine to say government should, but if there's some sort of regulatory mandate that says that the company itself needs to know what its supplier is supplying, and there's enforcement of that regulation, it will be much more effective, in my mind.
And just to comment on the report again, the companies referenced could have known that that was happening. They chose not to look. And I think that's a big issue. Many retailers are choosing not to look because as soon as they look, they are subject to regulation. They have to do something about it, but they can not know.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
I actually just, if I have 1 minute, may I, Olivia? Robin, you were talking about the things that keep you up at night. Can you give us, to close this, something positive that you've seen? And if you can't, I'll just throw the mic this way. But positive that you see is coming into the aquaculture sector that leaves us with something to think about in a positive way.
I think all of my panelists are very positive and have got a lot of excellent ideas. And yes, there is a lot of positive energy going into this. I guess the one thing that does keep me up at night, I will end on that, is we need to increase the rapidity of pace. I mean, this is where the funding and the investment really has to help us speed up now. So,
I think we'll do another panel, and you can all sit to my right so that I can get this kink out of my neck from listening so intently to you all. Thank you for Robin and Alessandro, Christo, Sven, Ali. Thank you for being here and listening as an audience. Have a wonderful Ocean Week.
Thank you again to all of you. Thanks to Nancy. Thanks to those panelists for that discussion on aquaculture. Thank you so much. All right, we have one more fireside chat for you before it's time for our coffee break. We're going to change gears a little bit here now. You all know the ocean covers nearly 70% of the Earth's surface. And given that that covers so much, you would think that we would know a bit more about it than we do. But actually, so much of the ocean is still incredibly unknown. Now, this is why exploring and enhancing our understanding of the global ocean ecosystem is key to addressing our environmental challenges today. So that's the subject of our next fireside chat on a mission to explore making a successful business out of ocean research. We're going to bring together for you a real success story and one of the investors who has been involved in making that success story happen. For that, would you please welcome with me Brian Connon, who is the VP of Ocean Mapping at Saildrone, and Jérôme de Botton from Capricorn Investments. Welcome. Welcome, Jérôme. Please have a seat. Welcome to both of you. Jérôme, I'm going to start with you. So, Capricorn has been involved in impact investing for 20 years. If you're not familiar, they now manage about $7 billion in assets. Some of the other investments include Tesla, SpaceX, Planet Labs. So my first question for you is, what is it about a company that makes you want to invest in it? Is there a secret sauce?
Well, thank you. And not that I would like Capricorn to be the focus, because obviously Saildrone is an incredible company, which we've backed now for almost 10 years. And I see a number of LPs and friends in the room, so I don't want to bore you with the whole story of Capricorn. But it relates to your question to the extent that we feel strongly about our mission statement. And the mission statement of the firm, when it was created in 2002, was about finding scalable solution to global environmental and social problems. And that's what we've been focusing on for 22 years now. The firm has about 10 billion in assets. About half of those assets are deployed in traditional sustainability-related investments. So we invest in public equities. We invest a lot in funds managed by others. So I was certainly listening today as a potential investor in some of the things that were presented. We have another 3 billion that we've deployed in GP stakes. By GP stakes, we like to invest in emerging asset management companies. So typical emerging managers who have a strong view or a very interesting subject, whether it's social or environmental, but wants to build an asset management. We feel, in fact, to answer some of the points that were made earlier, that part of the solution is having more asset management companies focusing on those environmental issues, and in turn, who can raise more assets and also be the recipient of larger allocations. One of the problems being today, if you're a large asset gatherer and you want to do something in aquafishing and you have billions to deploy, you just can't, because there are only so few asset management companies that will be able to take those assets from you. And then, the last third of our asset has been on what you relate to as impact investing. Indeed, we were in what we call at Capricorn climate tech from the very beginning. We were fortunate at the inception of the firm to have a partner who found himself very rich at a very young age and who decided to use those assets to make the world a better place. He created a foundation called the Skoll Foundation. He created a storytelling company that became a very well-regarded movie production company by the name of Participant. And then in turn, Jeff Skoll is his name, as I said, one of the two founders of eBay, decided to create Capricorn with 4 of my partners who are still here today, with one of the strong intention was to develop technologies. At the time, it was maybe called clean tech, then it became deep tech. Today, the word is climate tech. But indeed, we were investor number 3 or 4, I don't know, in SpaceX, the year it was founded. We invested in Tesla as investment number 4. And then a long series of investment in batteries, in renewable energy, in storage of energy, in space, in a number of related companies to space. And space is what led us to sell drone. As stated, we were active with SpaceX, active with a company called Planet. If you're familiar with Planet, it is one company that produces daily imagery that you find in the commercial press. Whenever you see a picture of Ukraine from up above, or when you see pictures of deforestation, all this is done by a company called Planet, initially called Planet Lab. And what Planet thought was bringing to the investors with this ability to monitor everything that happens on the planet. They have now a constellation of 300 satellites taking pictures of everything on this planet every 7 minutes. So when you talk about AI and the value of data, and you think of the fact that they now have terabytes of data going back 7 years, to a point where if you wonder whether your neighbor actually cut a branch so many years ago, you can go back and look at those pictures. But the problem we had with Seldrome, with the Planet that led us to Seldrome, is, as you know, that 75% of the surface of the planet is water. And from up above, you really cannot gather data with the satellite that we have. So we were looking for alternative, new ideas, and we ran into Richard Jenkins, who was the founder of Seldrome. Several years after having established a new world record of an unmanned vehicle on sand, but who was thinking and who was already making some inroads into building an unmanned vehicle, as you will see behind us. Eventually, he started as a non-for-profit, the Windy Schmidt Foundation, so that the idea had real merits and that someone should fund a project of that type. We followed them for several years, up to the point where in 2015, it was decided to go from non-for-profit to for-profit company. And we invested in the Series A, B, and recently C. And total transparency, because I heard that it's important too, we own about 12% of Seldrome. And that's how we got connected with Brian and his team.
Thanks for that, Jerome. So Brian, for those in the room who aren't familiar with Seldrome, talk us through it. Like, what's the pitch? How does it work? And what's it for?
Right, thank you. So we're builders and operators of uncrewed surface vehicles, or USVs, that are primarily wind-propelled and solar-powered. And the idea is that we can increase access to our oceans with a lower cost, lower risk to people, and a lower carbon impact on the environment. Because as you mentioned in your opening, there's so much we don't know about our planet, and with the ocean covering so much of it, if we can't measure what is out in the oceans, we can't really model or predict what is happening. And so at Saildrone, our vision is we build these USVs, and then we put the right sensors on them to collect the data that is most needed by those who are making important decisions about our climate. Now, we don't sell the vehicles themselves. We are a data or a mission as a service company. So again, that's reducing entry into the market for countries or groups who want to go out and collect this data, but maybe can't afford to do it from a traditionally crewed ship, which costs a lot of money and burns a lot of fuel. So as an example, we compared our ocean mapping mission to NOAA survey ships up in the Aleutians in 2022, and we avoided 97% of the carbon had a survey ship done that work. So we firmly believe that our niche is this long endurance and reduced carbon aspect to allow us to better quantify the planet.
And Saildrone can also play a role when it comes to extreme weather events. Just tell us quickly about that.
Right, so we had an idea from NOAA to drive a Saildrone into a hurricane on purpose. And so we went through a year of testing of designing a hurricane wing, which would allow us to survive going into the eye wall of a hurricane. And over the last 3 years, we've executed that mission several times, going into Cat 4 hurricanes. I live near New Orleans, so this is really important to me. And the idea is we don't predict or forecast intensification of hurricanes very well. We're pretty good at the track, but when you look at storms like Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, overnight it exploded and became a Category 5 storm that no one had predicted. And so if you can't make those forecasts, people are in danger because they think, oh, it's only a Cat 2. I'm going to stay in my house. I can ride it out. And then overnight it becomes a Cat 4. So what we do is we measure energy fluxes between the ocean and the atmosphere inside the hurricane to try and understand and capture the data required so we can model the physics of what's actually happening inside it.
And Jerome, just tell us a bit more from the very beginning when Capricorn first invested. Was there something in particular that spoke to Capricorn as an investor, something specifically that you said, this is something we want to invest in?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier, the search for data was driving us to find some technology to get good information about the ocean. And other things exist, but they all require sending out a ship to sea, very expensive and very limited in terms of its scope. So what we liked right away with Saildrone, and I think we invested very rapidly after it was decided to do a Series A round, was the fact that they were talking already about sending out 1,000 ships across the oceans. And since then, they've built bigger ships and they do even greater things. But it was the drive to be able to monitor the sea as much as we could monitor Earth.
Brian, as Saildrone was trying to develop its business, was the focus more on the science or on making money, or a little of both?
So really it was to show the capability, and what that capability could be science, it could be surveillance, it could be ocean mapping, and those are our 3 business lines today. But really what Richard was really focused on when he started the company was, we really have to prove that you can do it, and then take that to look for investment. And he's mentioned the Schmitz who got involved early on, saw the potential, and he built from there. And so we spent a lot of time working on the reliability of our vehicles and the quality of data that we're collecting. And so we spent about 7 years working with NOAA to validate the quality of the data that we collect for our mid-ocean sensors. And that really goes a long way to, as you go talk to potential customers, you can back it up and say that, we have that stamp of approval that we are collecting good quality data.
And then how did you go from there, from the beginnings as a startup to the unicorn success that it became?
Well, relentless persistence is probably the one way. It was starting out building our reputation, building the brand as ocean science data collection, supporting climate studies, working with universities in a lot of cases with small projects, and then really getting recognized by NOAA and others on the U.S. side in the government to go out and do these kind of bigger projects longer term. Our small vehicle can stay at sea for 12 months. No one has ever done that of having, certainly there are buoys, but when you have a vehicle that you can steer and send to specific places that can stay out for that long, it's really a game changer offshore. And then I joined the company in 2020 to build our ocean mapping capability so that we could apply this technology towards filling those gaps that you mentioned early on, that we just don't know what is on the bottom of our oceans. And so, again, working with governments, because in this field, governments are the really ones who are doing ocean mapping. Yes, there's some for offshore wind or oil and gas, but if you're looking at safety of navigation or EEZ mapping, that's primarily done by governments. We also put cameras on our vehicles and started taking pictures, and then developed a machine learning capability to recognize objects and classify them while we're out there. That became very attractive to a number of folks in the security space. Could we patrol for illegal fishing in marine protected areas? Could we patrol for human trafficking and drug trafficking? Could we do surveillance for security interests for the U.S. Navy and others? And all of those things are true. And so while we started on the science piece, certainly we are now seeing a lot more interest simply because we can put more eyes and ears on the ocean.
Jerome, talk to us about the notion of patience when you're investing in deep tech. When Capricorn first invested in Saildrone, were you thinking 2 years or 10 years or 20 years?
We have to say a date because now we invest other people's money. Initially it was the partners' money, and investing in SpaceX when it's launched, you really have to believe in the entrepreneur and the fact that someone's going to be able to do a better job at it than, say, NASA. Tesla, there were 500 electrical car, ventures at the time. Maybe 2 or 3 made it, but only really one revolutionized the auto industry. That's obviously Tesla. But that took 20 years, and that's what we keep telling our investors, is that we do fun things, we do things that have extraordinary potential, but whether you invest in SpaceX or QuantumScape or Saildrone or Planet or some of the other names that I could mention, you have to have this mindset that it's about changing the world, and you don't change the world overnight. So typically it will be 10 years plus, and sometimes it's been 15 years plus. But our investors understand that, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're supportive of the work that we do at Capricorn. We make very few investments. It's pretty odd to say that we are 20 plus years into the business. We manage very significant assets. And yet, if you look at our track record in venture, it's about 40 names. Which means basically 2 a year on average, which is a bit frustrating because you'd like to do more and be even more impactful, and you end saying no to a lot of people. But I think the secret sauce, if there is one to be had about Capricorn, beyond the mission and the quality of my partners, it's that they're really driven for change. And therefore, they will be patient before we reach that stage.
This OIP is all about connecting ocean innovators with ocean investors. Brian, what was the biggest challenge? I know you weren't at Saildrone right at the beginning, but from what you've learned, what was the biggest challenge for Saildrone in actually getting money and actually convincing investors right at the start?
Right, I think it was just trying to build the product to be able to show what we could do. So Richard, our founder, did that a lot on his own. And
in his garage, you said, no?
Yeah, there was in the garage around. He was scrounging pieces of composite from shipyards and using his network in the sailing world to get the materials that he needed. And so I think the real challenge was just getting the tech to the point that he was willing to show it. And he is a very demanding CEO along those lines. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge, was showing the capability, and then getting a little bit of money, and then taking it the next step, showing more capability and going after that additional funding. And that was the approach that he took.
Jerome, what should innovators who are perhaps here today, who are late Series A, late Series B, what should they be doing to get an investment group like Capricorn to invest if you only do 2 per year?
First, they have to reach out to us, and we try to be pretty open. And we have analysts in Palo Alto and in New York who speak all languages. So clearly there's no obstacle per se. People have to remember what our mission statement. We're about global solutions, and therefore scalable technologies. So it has to be something where you feel if you get an investment from Capricorn that it will contribute to a significant change. So there's certain things we don't do, like we didn't do apps, we don't do certain things which we fear are too easily replicable. So it's about this situation where you invest in a company that in a business that's capital intensive. You make that investment, you make sure to commit and help that company and refinance it when it's needed and be there all along. And in the end, you're making sure that this group of entrepreneurs is there to make it work. But that company, again, has to be focused on sustainability, has to be impactful, has to be about bringing up changes.
Brian, the same question for you, flipped around. Saildron's now post-Series C. With the experience of hindsight, just experience in general, what piece of advice would you give to innovators here?
Yeah, I think really the key to our success was to have I will say an operational customer who was our ambassador, on the receiving end, who believed in us as well and helped facilitate those early investments by conducting missions that showed the results, the data quality, the scientific results, because then you can turn those around and present those to investment firms to show them that, yes, we can do this and it's worthwhile. And it also helped us that we were sitting at the top of Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, you have a lot of people who are, a workforce source who are used to working in a high-paced environment and really dedicated to making sure that things work. So that was a benefit for us too, just location.
We've been talking a lot today about transparency and the importance of transparency. Can you each talk about that and why that is so key? And I know jokingly, Jerome, you said to me as a joke, I should ask what they didn't tell us. Talk to us a bit about that. And are there things that are hidden just by necessity, or is it full transparency? What's the ideal?
Well, things have changed quite a bit. Well, first of all, I should say everybody means to be transparent. It becomes a matter of when the information is really relevant. When you invest in venture and you raise money for a 10-year fund, sending a monthly report is about self-defeating. It's not about next month. It's about a year or 2 or 3 or 5 from now. And yet, as you do raise money from foundation and traditional investors, they have themselves those requirements to get data from the asset managers quarterly in the best case. So yeah, we need to put out a lot of information. What has really changed over the past 4 years since COVID has been the influx of SPACs, which are those new investment vehicles that allow, in essence, what is still a venture business, not a profitable business, one that may be growing, to go to the public market and raise money through such vehicle. And many of our portfolio companies like Joby Aviation or QuantumScape or Planet that I mentioned earlier went that route. And the downside of that is that suddenly the investors see the value of those investments move up and down every day, every week, every month. They become totally emotional about it and forget that, as I mentioned, for SpaceX or Tesla, in fact, Tesla is a fantastic example where you look at what the early investors made the day the company had its IPO and how much more they would have made. And it's an exponential number compared to the early stage had they kept it till recently. So we like to tell our investors, I'm repeating myself here, that what we do is really longer term. And information is important. We'll get the right information, but we try not to blind them with just too much information as the SPACs do.
Brian, what's your response?
Well, of course, we are completely transparent with our investors. And really, there are certainly things that our board wants to see and our investors that they want to see, and we certainly provide that. And generally, it is financial. But the thing that I've liked with our board is, I get to go up and brief them on the ocean mapping piece of our business and explain to them what we're trying to do and give them that visibility into our actual operations. So it's not just about the finances, it's about how we're operating. And I think that's been really appreciated. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback from them on that.
Brian, earlier today, Emmanuel Ledon was talking about the importance of partnerships. And I know that's something that's been key to Saildron as well. Can you tell us about that?
Right, partnering with other companies, with government agencies, international agencies are a big part of what we do. It's a small community in the ocean space, it really is. And so partnerships with things like Seabed 2030, which is a JEPCO and Nippon Foundation effort to map our world, that allows us to see what requirements are out there, what is the scale of what needs to be done, and opens up conversations that allow us to, frankly, sit down at a table and have those discussions that, we're all moving towards the same goal, even if we're in the, might be slightly competitive with one another, there's room for everyone. Again, 71% of the world's covered by water, so a lot of ocean out there for us to work.
We have people here from all over the world. What about branching out of your own region or your own country? Do you have any advice for innovators here who are hoping to scale up globally?
Right, I think the answer is every country with a coastline has the exact same issues that they're dealing with, whether that's managing marine resources or conserving fisheries or trying to understand coastal resilience against flooding. They all have the same issues, and so it's very easy to take something that works in one place and pitch that to another country who has the same issues, and maybe they just haven't identified a way to look at it. So I think that's the great thing about this space is we all sit on the edge of an ocean, we all rely on the ocean, and so we can all apply these solutions around the world.
Jerome, looking toward the future, how do you see Capricorn's relationship with Saildrone continuing?
Well, as you mentioned, they just went through a Series C funding at a valuation of just about 500 million, which is healthy for a company that's been around for 10 years. But as Brian, I think, touched on, the potential for Saildrone is far greater than what's been accomplished until now. So this is typically, a situation where a growth fund, will then participate again in Series D when it comes around. I think we're in Saildrone for many, many years to come.
And Brian, let's talk about Saildrone's objectives for the future. How do you scale up?
Well, we're scaling right now, and it's really about building the USVs to carry out the missions. What we realized early on, we had already built the first 100 small 7-meter USVs in-house. So we had those kind of in the warehouse ready to go. As we started building larger vehicles due to increased payloads that required more power and needed a bigger vehicle, we realized we couldn't build them fast enough. So we've outsourced the building of our hulls to a composite manufacturer for our 10-meter, and then for the 20-meter, we actually went with a naval shipbuilder in the U.S. called Austal USA, who's building these out of aluminum. And so when you do that, that allows you to very quickly scale up the production of these vehicles. And so now we can, look at the long-range pipeline and say, okay, well, it looks like we need to build another 5. We have the ability to do that very quickly. And so that's kind of our focus right now is what is the sweet spot for the number of vehicles that we put out and continue to improve the capabilities of the sensors that are already on board, and then evaluating new sensors and what new thing could we add that would give a return on investment for us, but also would be a game changer for the community. Again, I thank Elon Musk for Starlink, because in the offshore ocean world, that's a game changer. We can now move much bigger data sets from sea to shore that normally we would have to wait till we pulled into port. Now we can move that data immediately off the platform. And that's just opening up a huge amount of opportunity for us.
We're almost out of time. Jerome, just a few words in closing.
Well, I would just add that while we are not solely focused on the ocean at Capricorn, and in fact, few of our investment, are as closely related as the one to Saildrone. The number of companies that we've invested recently in the decarbonization area or industry, who are having also, I think, or going to have a great impact on the industry that we've discussed all day, mostly because they've developed those electrolysis systems that turns basically carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide and other material that are then being used for jet fuel, SAF, and for the shipping industry. It's called 12. I encourage very much of you who like that topic to go at 12.co. It's a company that's already worth $1 billion, so they've already grown quite a bit. But I think in terms of impact, it'll be different than Celdrome, but probably as important.
And Brian?
That's just, I think it's great for the community, for events like these, where we get together and see all the kind of very different technologies that are all focused in the same space, because that, again, opens the dialogue for us to have these conversations. So we believe at Saildrone that, you know, a healthy ocean results in a healthy world, and we want to be a part of that, and look forward to continuing.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give them a nice round of applause. Thank you so much to both of you. All right, we are going to take our coffee break now. We're going to start back up again around 4:45. We're going to be talking about managing MPAs. Can I just please ask that everyone who's in the first 2 rows, can you take your things with you, because we will have His Serene Highness Prince Albert II joining us with his team, so he'll take up a bit of this space. So please go ahead, if you could take your things and just move back, that would be great. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. Oops. Thank you. Sorry about that. I think you're fine. I think this side, yeah, this is okay. Oops. Oh, thank you. My mic's